It's interesting because connected to religion, it seems to me that that when these issues get attention, it's because there are very often cases where many religious fundamentalists do not accept that flexibility or that broader definition. And in fact, there have been some recent cases of some real direct assaults on both sides of the aisle. We had recently the first Muslim who was sworn in to Congress, who did so on a Quran, was told by many he should not do that. He should use the Bible because America is a Christian nation. And on the other side, Mitt Romney, who is running for the Republican nomination for president, is a Christian, but he happens to be a Mormon, is told, well, I'm not sure about that. Is that really Christianity? And by the way, as you know, told this not only by some on the right, but also some who are defined on the left, including the Reverend Al Sharpton. So this is, as you reflect throughout the book, it does not look promising at this time in our history for there to be movement on this in many circles.
You know, I would say yes and no, Fred. Every time the media wants to focus on this issue, they not necessarily, but naturally pick people on the extremes because those make the best sound bites. Where do most of us live? Well, most of us live in families where children have left the religion of their childhood, maybe married into another religion. Now they have grandchildren growing up in different religions. A family gathering comes together, and you've just got a multicultural situation. Now, you can deal with that poorly or you can deal with it well, but it's happening. And people, since we have this freedom of expression and freedom of religion in America, people are, I don't want to use the word experimenting, but following paths that are certainly like non-Western. We find people doing yoga. We find yoga being brought into Episcopal churches in the basement, you know. So there's an interesting cultural conversation going on. And when those lines begin to blur, creative stuff can happen. Now, I think the brittleness of both ends of the spectrum, that is, those who would be fundamentalist secularists and those who are religious fundamentalists, shows that what's happening in the middle threatens them. But what's happening in the middle is, I think, where most people live.
You know, along these lines, Gary, one of the reasons why I think so many of the issues that you cover in the book are important, folks have to realize it reflects importance beyond who is elected and beyond policy. One of the things we talked about recently on this program was embryonic stem cell research as an example, and getting to this idea of policy being influenced by religion. We had a discussion about this with an elected official who we were talking about his opposition to the embryonic stem cell research and support of the veto, President Bush, his first veto of expanding federal funding for this. You addressed the issue of reason in the book.
Yes.
And the question I asked was, well, you then are saying then that you would also like to stop fertility treatment then, correct? Because
I'm saying
that
other person,
to the elected official,
yes.
Because those would be the embryos that would be used that would otherwise be discarded. And the answer there was no, was no. So getting to this issue of reason, it's why I think this is so important to talk about it, because sometimes reason gets lost, and you address that in the book.
I think in those questions of ethics, medical ethics, beginning of life issues, end of life issues, research issues, they're not purely technical questions. They're not purely scientific questions. There needs to be an ethicist at the table in those conversations. The other thing to talk about is how the American system ideally works. You may have your religious beliefs, I have mine. We may have none. That's our freedom as individuals. The way the system ought to work is that you sit down, tell me your beliefs, what you think, your perspective on it. This person tells me his or hers. This person tells me his or hers. Then we walk into the voting booth and vote our conscience. Then religion, in terms of the implementation of government policy, drops out. Okay? Now that would be in an ideal world. Okay? We need to have this conversation. Is there a Buddhist ethic governing stem cells? What's the Jewish position, the Christian position? Let's talk about all of these points of view. Then when we come to a technical and a scientific decision, the ethics should be considered as well. I don't think we can obviously think of human embryos the same way we would think of tadpoles or something like that. Most ethical systems would agree there is a difference in kind or quality between the human and other life. But we need to iron out what that means in a country where we disagree.
Yeah.
And that's a tough and difficult conversation, but it's better than halting all conversation by saying this is the way it must be.
Well, I'm sure your book is going to start a lot of conversations
I hope
about
so.
this,
It's about language.
these
so.
issues. All right.
Yeah.
Gary, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Fred.